Welcome to Pondering Passages. This is Kurt Austin. My friend David Mullins and I are going to be jumping into Psalm 122 today. We're going to be talking about the temple. We're going to be talking about what that looks like for the pilgrimage. And we're going to be trying to figure out what's it mean to us? How is God speaking to us as we read this beautiful passage from a couple thousand years ago? So join us. We'll be right back and we'll dive right in. Welcome back to Psalm 122. Today we're going to talk about this psalm. Dave, this is an interesting psalm. And as I read it every day this week, I was kind of struck by two things. One was that it's part of the Song of Ascents. So it does.
Yes.
You could read it as a standalone, but if you put it in that context, it helps. And then second, that the psalmist is really waxing poetic about Jerusalem itself, and his desire for God to engage that city in some way. That stood out to me.
Yeah, and I will have to say, well, let's go ahead and just get this up on the screen. A Song of Ascent, and I don't do pilgrimages. I don't know about you, and so I don't completely understand what it must feel like to kind of have this destination as a goal. I mean, we've gone on vacation, we've gone places. Well, I take that back. When our kids were young, we decided to drive to North Carolina, and we thought, why don't we just start out like right at their bedtime, and we'll just drive straight through. It's like what, a 20-hour trip, something like that. They'll sleep, and once we get there, they'll be awake. Worst trip ever. The last 5 hours, I mean, it's kind of like, can we switch off like every hour, because I'm starting to doze off, And so when we finally got to the beach, I was glad. I was very glad.
There you go. See, it's just like that. I was glad when they said to me, "Let's go to the beach."
Yeah, when we got to the beach,
and now here we are.
Yeah, yeah, there we go. Yeah, I mean, and so I try to put myself in the place of the psalmist, and and I don't know exactly how it worked. Maybe this isn't something they did every year, because for some folks this would be quite the journey.
Oh, man.
And then all of a sudden someone goes, "Hey, why don't we go to the house of the Lord?" I mean, they believe this is where God resided. This was his literal house. Mm-hmm. It isn't like today. This is where God resided. Let's go to the house of the Lord. And I could just see someone go, "Oh yeah, yeah." And they start planning and everything. And then finally they've arrived.
Yeah. And it would be, I mean, if you think in the day, I mean, just from an architectural standpoint, this place was a marvel.
Oh, it had to have been.
The well-built city. I mean, I've had the privilege of visiting Israel twice and going to the Wailing Wall, which is what's the only thing left of standing of the original temple walls. Oh my word, it's huge. I mean, it's just, the stones are massive, and how they were able to pull that off. And if you showed up from your little village out in the middle of nowhere, where the big meeting place was either in a small little synagogue or around the well, or, I mean, this would have just been jaw-dropping, to approach this from the distance, or to come up over a hill and to see this thing standing there. It really would feel, and how they joined together all of those blocks that were just tons each, that were, how in the world would you expect to take that down,
Yeah,
even in today's day?
Yeah, I remember the first time we took our kids to Chicago, and we're walking downtown, and they're looking at all these buildings, and they're taking it in, and it surprised me, because I've been to Chicago, I've been to big cities. It's like, yeah, but this was the first time they were there, and they were simply overwhelmed with all of this. And I can imagine, well, I can't imagine, a pilgrim going there. And maybe it isn't their first time, but maybe it's one of the few times. And now here we are, and standing inside your gates. We're actually inside the gates.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, they're marveling at how well built it is. I kind of question that next line. Its seamless walls cannot be breached.
Well, they didn't know back then. I mean, probably,
Yeah.
I mean, like I say, you look at it and you think, with the armament that they would have had in that day and age, how would you have breached that?
Yeah.
How would you have knocked down the Temple Mount? I mean, how is it possible that there's only one wall left standing? And I was like, my gracious, that was quite a feat for whoever would have done that. So, but in this time, in this day, it would have really been pretty impressive. I was, we had my wife's uncle's wife. What's that? Like 3 times removed.
My wife's uncle's wife. That would be your aunt, right?
My aunt-in-law.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, so she died 3 years ago this week, and so I was thinking about this passage as it related to that, because it popped up as a memory on my Facebook 3 years ago, and I'd taken a picture of the church that the funeral wasn't there, but the funeral dinner was at this church, and it's the church I grew up in Farmland, Indiana. There's nothing
Farmland,
much impressive.
Indiana.
Farmland. It's a real place. Look it up. There's not much impressive about that little church. It's a typical little Methodist church built in the 40s or 50s. I mean, it's just, there's not much to look at that you go, wow, architecturally, this thing stands out. It has a big stained glass window, and all the rest are just regular windows. And I took that, and it was like, suddenly I had, as I stood in there, I was the only person in there because everybody else was in the fellowship hall. And I thought about the number of times that we had youth group up at the altar, that I sang in the choir, that I played that piano, that preached my first sermon in that church. And all of those things.
Do you remember what you preached on?
Yeah.
What was it?
I had just done a class. It was my freshman year in college, and it was a class on, what was that class? It was like some education class. And the professor had something said about the destructive vortex of human existence, or something like that. It was the vortex was the word that really stood out to me. And that was kind of the crux of how we were able to find a way out of that vortex as we grab onto God.
Wow. That is some deep stuff there.
It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. I was so nervous. Man, I was so nervous.
I bet.
But anyway, so the memories that came flooding back on that, and you have to think, if this isn't your first time and you've had multiple visits here, or you live close enough that you could take this journey regularly, you would have those kinds of memories. This love for the place, because it represented. Everybody would have known the story, right? Everyone would have known the Exodus story. Everyone would have known the temple being built, and the donations for the tabernacle, and all of those things. That is part of their history, culminated in the building of this place. And so,
and it's not just about him. Verse 4, he says, all the tribes of Israel, the Lord's people, make their pilgrimage here. And I think that means something, to this psalmist, that it's not just him coming there, but he is connected through this building, or by this temple, to all the Lord's people. And,
you think about like going to camp every year. One of the things I loved about camp, because we had a pretty good sized youth group as a kid. We were one of the larger youth groups at the camp that we would go to for our district. But it was always so much fun to see that there were so many other people out there who were part of this family of God that got together, and, new faces every year. And you miss some old faces that didn't come back, because as people graduate and stuff. But it was this relationship. So imagine you kind of join this swarm of people walking into the
Yeah.
city gates from every place who could make this pilgrimage, and that
Yeah.
would be really exciting to know that you are not alone.
Yeah. Everyone coming together.
Yeah.
And why are they doing it? To give thanks. To give
Mm-hmm.
thanks, as the law requires of Israel. Yeah, I think I said last week, I really need to dive down into just this whole era of worship. And I know they had different festivals. I know in Jesus' day, they would make this, I think, yearly pilgrimage for the Passover. But,
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
journeys are not easy.
Yeah.
Uh, so because I'm unclear on whether, the psalmist, if this is something they would do every year, or if it's a few times in their life that they would make this journey.
Well, I mean, I think it probably ran the gamut, right? I mean, it's if I don't have the money to make this trip, or I can't
The
leave my
resources,
family to
yeah.
make this trip, or if I live in Bethlehem, which is a stone's throw, no, a little farther than that from
Like
Israel,
to see
then
you throw that stone.
yeah. But you would think, okay, well, I live close enough, I could make this journey. Now you're still going to have to spend the night. You're still have to it's
Yeah.
too far to go home and come back. But I mean, even that would be something probably more reasonable. So you probably see maybe it's some of the same people that you didn't, you saw the year before.
Yeah.
And then that stone, here stands the throne, uh, the thrones of the dynasty of David. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, and that would just represent their kingship, their government.
Now,
Uh,
one of the things I'm going to bring up, because
do it.
this kind of surprised me. This is a Psalm of David. And sometimes in scripture, I have assumed, and I think other people assume, is that David, since it's a Psalm of David, that he wrote it. But the temple wasn't in existence when David was
Right.
around.
Yeah. Just, I mean, start there. The
Yeah.
fact that it's the thrones of the dynasty of David, that means that
Right.
they're generations. So yeah, it was definitely maybe a psalm in honor of David.
Well, and that's what scholars say. They say a Psalm of David could mean a lot of different things. It means that he could have written it,
Mm-hmm.
or no, it means that he did write it, or maybe it was inspired by him, inspired by something
Right.
in his life.
Right.
But it really, I guess, surprised me. And there are a few Psalms of David where he mentions, the temple or
Yeah.
Jerusalem, or, something that it's like, oh, you know what? There's a chance that either someone stuck that in later,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know if they would really do that, or it was written by a psalmist with David in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, because Solomon, his son, is the one who actually built the temple.
Right.
So, I mean, just to
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah.
And the other thing that it dawned on me this morning, Dave, that you and I are not biblical scholars.
No.
We are biblical students.
Yes.
And we are learning, and we are trying to figure this out. But I would never call myself a scholar. I would think I have some knowledge because I've been reading a lot and I've been trying to understand it. My goodness, if I could get a book, a chapter fully understood by the time I die, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But
and there's some things I have a lot more knowledge about than other things. Don't
ever call it, folks. Anybody who's watching this, do not call it a version of a Bible. Don't do it. Dave has a lot of knowledge about versions and translations.
Yes, translations. But anyway, spiritual formation. I've got a lot of knowledge in that area, but and probably a little bit more knowledge about the New Testament than the Old Testament, because there's just so much in the Old Testament. And then you start talking about the social and the economics and the laws and the life of those who lived during the Old Testament era, which spans thousands of years. And so it's not just understanding one thing, you're understanding like the time of Abram, or even the time before that. And then you've got the time of like Joseph and the time of David, and then beyond that, the time of the kings, because that
Well, and
was
let's say,
different, and
like
exile.
Joseph in Egypt. Then you need to understand the customs of Egypt to really
Yes.
get that.
Yeah.
Babylonian exile. You got to understand what
Yeah.
that was. So it's
And
not a simple matter of saying, well, I know a lot about the Jewish
it
culture, because it was.
exactly. And so you do at some point lean on scholars. What we try to do here is we try to use it formationally, which means what is the passage asking of me? What is God speaking to me through the passage? And we'll at least I'll get there in this, because there's a very specific thing that God is speaking to me through this passage.
Well, let's get there, because our time is burning.
Oh, okay.
We've been
Okay.
chatty today.
Yeah, we have been. This last part, just talking about Jerusalem and praying, and the desire that the psalmist has for Jerusalem. And what really landed with me was, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord, and now we are here. The destination that I'm looking forward to the most isn't the beach. It's not, any place else. The destination I'm looking for is that destination when I finally see my Lord and my Savior welcoming me home. And this temple for them represented that. It represented a place where heaven and earth came together and met, because that's where God was. And I almost imagine that for them to go to the temple is almost as exciting as me thinking about one day seeing my Lord and my Savior, because that was where the presence of the Lord was. And that is, my goal too. And so I was glad when they said, come to me, to your final resting place, your destination. And here we are. And so, I don't know, again, it's formational. So I would say I might be reading too much into it, but it's just a way that God reminded me through this, that I'm not home yet, and there is a home. And when I finally get there, I know I will be simply in awe.
That's beautiful.
So how's this passage speaking to you? What's it saying to you, Curt?
Well, we'll go to the next slide there. I think I underlined really on day 1 in my Bible, for the sake of my family and friends, I will say, may you have peace. And I guess I put it in the context of our world today as like, we need to keep showing up into the presence of God. We need to keep doing that. And we need to be praying for peace in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our churches,
Yes.
for two sakes. I mean, he says in 8 and 9, number 1, for the sake of my family and friends, but then 9, then he says, for the sake of the house of the Lord. So for the sake of God himself, let's have peace.
Amen.
I think we've just lived in a really tough few years where we've become more and more divided on everything.
Oh, yes.
Everything.
Yeah,
And
everything.
this is from all of the New Testament to even this Psalm. You've got the writers saying, can we have peace?
Yeah.
What is one of the fruit of the Spirit? Peace.
It's peace. Yeah.
So when we truly are living in the Spirit of God, then one of the fruits that will come from that is peace. And for what, for me, the sake is for my family, for my friends, and for my own love of God and my relationship with him. So that's what stood out to me this week.
Yeah. And when you talk about peace, I see when Jesus shows up, especially after the resurrection, he keeps saying peace, peace. Before he leaves, he says, my peace I give to you. I do not give the peace like the world does. Don't let your hearts be troubled. And I think of one of my favorite phrases from Dr. Adrian von Kamm. And he says, when you push past the pace of grace, you lose your peace. And so it's about being in step with God's grace, well, like you said, we need to keep showing up in the presence of God. Because when we don't, we will get off track. We will push past that pace of grace, and we will lose our peace. And when we lose our peace, it's not just us that loses our peace. It's our family. It's our friends. I mean,
yeah, we get off track. I mean, I think this is what God wants for us. And that's, when you've been on I'm sure you in your experience, you've been on a church retreat, or you've been a personal retreat, right? Where you've gone, and what's one of the things that you come away with? You come away with joy. You come away with peace.
Yeah.
Because everything, the pace changes, the intent changes, your focus changes, and it gets more centered in what's true. And I think that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad way to live.
It's not. It's not. I think of the song, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with you.
I thought that's me.
Oh, well, that's harder. It's easier for me to have it begin with you. But yeah,
I thought you really screwed that song.
No, I did that on purpose.
What are you doing?
Yeah, okay, but see, sometimes that's what we hope. We hope that peace begins with the other person, but it has to begin with us.
Good job, Dave. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful psalm. I like it a lot.
It really, really is. And Curt, great insights, especially about the peace. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have had a great time today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want, please leave a comment in the bottom. If you can, please go ahead and check the box to subscribe. Follow us. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We are in YouTube. We're working on our own website. I mean, the market is yet open. We still
ponderingpassages.com. There is something there. There are things there.
And so jump in, be a part of that conversation, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here in about a week.
Blessings.
City guy is driving out, and he's looking at the countryside. He just loves it. He stops at this farm, and he's looking at these pigs leaning on the fence, looking at these pigs. And he notices one of them only has 3 legs. And the farmer comes up and goes, "What's up?" And he said, I love these animals, and I'm just wondering, why does that pig only have 3 legs? Oh, that pig, that's a special pig. That pig, when there was the tornado last year, that pig came into the house and woke us all up and got us into the storm shelter, came into the storm shelter with it, saved our lives. I mean, that's one of the most special pigs I've ever seen. Then he said, a little while later, he said, I think it was in the winter, we had that fire in the stove and it started spreading. And the pig burst through the door and got us all up and got us outside, saved our lives. Yeah, but why does he only have 3 legs? Oh, because a pig that special, you don't eat all at once.